That's exactly right. And yeah, and I did think about how we get to know the people in our lives, like partners and friends, and it's through conversation.
Hmm.
That's how the friendships are struck. It's very rare that there will be an action, and it's very, you don't get to watch people doing things, So I wanted to throw a reader right in there.
Welcome to our latest episode of Book Reporter Talks to. Our guest today is Christopher Whitaker, and we're going to be talking about his brilliant novel, All the Colors of the Dark, which has been a multi-week, I can't keep up with how many week, New York Times
Seven.
bestseller.
So
And it's
far,
also
seven.
seven,
Yeah.
seven. But today's Tuesday. We'll see what Wednesday brings. We shall see. We shall see.
Hmm.
It's also a Book Reporter Bets On selection, which is not as big as the New York Times, but in my reader's world, like I guess my word counts a little. Our reviewer Norma Peel had this to say about it. All the Colors of the Dark is at once part crime, part coming of age tale, and part heartbreaking love story. And I think that sums it up really well. It only becomes more absorbing as it proceeds. Nearly every piece of this complicated epic story falls into place in surprising, satisfying ways. So there you go. That's it. Chris lives in the UK where he joins us today. He's finally home. He's been on this crazy tour. And I had the pleasure of finally meeting him after 4 years in Brielle after interviewing him three times for Book Reporter Talks to and Bookaccino Live and for We Begin at the End. And with that, welcome, Chris. It's so nice to have you here to talk about a new book.
Yes, thank you. It was so good to finally meet you, Brett. And that event was amazing, wasn't it? That
The
was so
event
cool.
was fabulous. The
Yeah.
interviewer was great. The crowd was great. It was
Yep.
just, and you're in a beach town and you don't think it's going to be that kind of a crowd. You don't think
Yeah.
it's going to
It
be,
was so beautiful as well, the town. Like I
yeah.
fell in love with it. Like I could happily live there.
Yeah.
That's
See,
what I
see,
thought.
someday, you have all these places. You can go back to Aspen and live there for a while. There are all these
Yeah.
places that you see for 2 minutes and then
Yeah.
you're on the road.
I know.
So,
I know.
how about if you tell us a top line pitch of All the Colors of the Dark? Like, how do you pitch it?
I would say it's a story of two abducted teenagers who fall in love in the pitch black basement they're being held in, having never seen each other. The boy, Patch, escapes and can't find his way back to the girl, Grace. The police don't believe that she's real. They think that because of the trauma, he kind of conjured her out of his mind. But he knows in his heart that she is. So he, along with his best friend Saint, begin this epic search for this missing girl and the man that took them that spans 26 years of their lives. So we follow them from child to adult.
It's really amazing because we start in 1975. It takes place over
Yep.
27 years. What drew you to start in 1975? Like what was there something about that year that mattered?
Without giving any spoilers away, it was around the time of some crucial things that were happening in the US, in the news and things like that that were pivotal to the plot. And then I counted forward and ended up in 2001, roughly, for the end of it, and then began to research every single thing that had happened in the US. And also didn't want to bombard people with like historical details and stuff, because so things should be really subtle because like it might be a huge political change going on in the US, but we're seeing it through the eyes of two teenagers who probably are not that invested in the politics of the country. So you see occasionally you see Saint taking a walk through the town and she sees some flags in people's yards, and that's kind of as close as we get to the big things going on. But we definitely keep up with changing fashions and hairstyles and clothes and things. Although Saint and Patch would probably declare themselves very uncool in that they don't, they just stay the same pretty much. Patch certainly does not change much throughout the book.
No, you could just picture the outfit changes for the film will not be a lot.
No,
It'll be a very
no,
small
exactly
wardrobe.
right. Yeah, I think Saint makes more of an effort. Saint tries, but she always has like a motive for it. Like she's trying to look a certain way for a certain thing, or trying to be someone that maybe she isn't because she thinks that would be more a more acceptable version of herself. So we can kind of see a bit of it through Saint, particularly when she gets ready for prom.
Yes.
And that's kind of disastrous, that scene, because she doesn't really know how to put on makeup, and her grandmother definitely doesn't know how to put on makeup. So
And no one really knows but you know what? That's most people in America. That's most
yeah,
people all over the world. And we sit
definitely
there and we
UK as
watch
well. Yep.
the Instagrammable, but most of us are not Instagrammable. Like
No. No, I'm learning to love Instagram now.
Yes.
I used to do Twitter like way more, but I've fallen out of love with Twitter. It's just
Oh,
very shouty sometimes, and people seem to be very angry, and I'm there for the books. And Bookstagram is beautiful, and the people are lovely, and yeah. So
you're doing a great job on it too. I go out and like you all the day long. I'm like, because you have great
uh,
stuff up there. And it's really interesting to see. At the beginning, it was you feeding it with this is where I'm going to be. And
yeah,
now to see the readers jumping on and what
yes,
they're saying, it's
yeah,
completely, it's a, you've done the flip. And then you can just acknowledge what they're saying and also see what they're saying in all the places you didn't get to, though you had a big tour.
yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah, because obviously it was lockdown last time, for We Begin at the End, and the world was a very, very different place. So although the book did really well and published really well, and Amy and the whole team did an amazing job, I felt slightly disconnected. Although I did like 100 Zooms or something crazy like that, it isn't the same as going to the place and seeing it in the flesh, meeting people and shaking their hands and seeing what they've got to say about the book, and particularly meeting all the booksellers, the people
Yes.
that really drive the book, along with book bloggers and Instagrammers and people like that. They are really the lifeblood, and I wouldn't have a career were it not for them. So just the chance to go and see them and say thank you,
Yeah.
really special.
And then on Instagram, see what they create to come back to you with. And that's the most
Yeah.
interesting thing to me is like, what are you going to share back? What are you seeing? Because you did 4 years of writing this. And then it's
Mhm.
like, what are they taking away from it that, and sometimes authors have told me, I didn't see this as being important, but they showed me how important this one thing
Yeah.
was. And
Yeah,
to me, it
I've
was a
had that a
thing.
lot. I've had so many people like in my messages, talking about grief and having a difficult time, and the books help them open up and things like, and it's stuff that you would never imagine, that your story could reach, and it's reached some really cool places like the Jill Biden thing. It's just like mad, I sit in my garden office, in my small town in the UK, creating this story for 4 years on my own, and then somehow it ends up on the beach in the hands of the First Lady of the US. It like that one really got me. Sometimes they really do, like they stop me in my tracks and stun me, and that one really did. It
Yeah, it's
really,
like, wait a second, how did she find that? What did
yeah,
she see to get to that?
you
Well, we
know,
know she read Book Reporter. I'm only joking.
obviously, yeah, yeah. But then like she's sitting there reading Patch and Saint and Sammy, which
I know. And you're just sitting there like, wow, this is like this amazing moment.
yeah,
But talking about grief and tragedy and stuff, something happened in your childhood that had this terrible effect on you that
yeah,
influenced this book. And
yeah.
like we talked about with your last book, we had that amazing story that even went, people, you have to watch this, even went for the hookers that were at his wedding. I mean, we really got into that one. Okay.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about what happened during your childhood here, because when I heard that story, when I was down in Brielle, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, so my parents split up when I was very young, and the thing about divorce is all of a sudden your world is opened up. You kind of have this tight family unit, don't you? And then it's blown wide open and all these new people come into it. And a man came into it and was a violent person and a bit of a drinker, and he didn't like me, and one night when I was asleep he pulled me out of bed by my arm, and we both heard it break, and then he told me to go back to my bedroom and not tell my parents, and so I had this really long night, and I was scared of him, and there were some threats made, so I had this really long night with them in a lot of pain, and then the next morning told my parents that I'd done it playing football. And it was something that I'd stuck to, a story that I stuck to until maybe like 3 years ago when I told my dad about it for the first time. And and like probably a few months after it happened, he burnt my leg with a cigarette. And I remember him telling my mum that I'd bumped into him. And I know that I didn't bump into him because I still remember it. I've got like a perfect, almost perfect circular scar on my thigh, as a memory of it. And I clearly, some memories, even when you're small, they just
Mhm.
stick. They're normally bad memories, annoyingly. They tend to be the things that stick in your brain. And And so I had a rough time with him, and then it went, I began to track my life back to this event, and thought maybe that I was kind of a normal kid up to that point, and then afterwards didn't feel so normal. I had trouble sleeping, which I still have now, and but also, we talked about the stabbing last time, and I don't think that would have happened had this thing not happened, because I didn't like feeling like a victim. So when someone asked for my phone, I refused to give it, even when they pulled out a knife and stabbed me. And so I think that it probably set up a lot of the things that happened in my life. When I lost loads of money in the city, I think probably had this thing not happened, I would have been more able to put my hand up and say, I've something bad's happened, I need some help. But because I learned at a very young age not to do that, I tended to deal with everything on my own, and it got me into way more trouble. And so I used that when I was writing Patch. Patch is a kid that's walking to school. Here's a girl in trouble, steps in and kind of lives her life almost, because she gets away and he gets abducted. And so everything pivots. It's this sliding doors moment in his life. He's on one track, completely derailed, goes down another road. But I think partly the story was about what happens afterwards. Because when we begin at the end, we follow Duchess for a year in her life. We pick her up at 13, put her down at 14, and everyone messaged me saying, what happens next? What happens to Duchess? And this story went some way to explaining what does happen. If something bad happens when you're a kid, what does happen to the rest of your life? And what happens to Patch is not everything bad, happens to him. He discovers art. He picks up a paintbrush. He never would have done that had he not wanted to paint this version of this missing girl. And he's a very talented artist, and becomes wealthy and successful because of it. So he finds his way to art in the same way that I probably wouldn't have turned to writing had I not been stabbed, had it not been PTSD, had I not gone to the library and borrowed this self-help book. I wouldn't have ended up here now talking to you about a book that I've written, because there's no way I would have thought that I could have become a writer. I would have thought it was beyond me. I would have thought someone that went to my school that has no qualifications could not write a New York Times best-selling book, or could not, certainly not get themselves published and make a living in that way. So
Mhm.
it was about all these things, the good and bad, that come from trauma and come from a difficult childhood. Because I believe that I see the world in a different way. I believe that I see characters in a different way. To how I might have had this not have happened to me. I certainly have an empathy for kids that have a tough time and go through a violent situation, and I pour that into my characters, and it seems to work because people really connect with them.
Yeah, completely connect with them. In fact, our reviewer noted throughout the book, Whitaker explores how childhood trauma shapes our adult selves, the
Mhm.
decisions we make, the paths we take, the relationships that succeed or fail. And it's interesting that she didn't know what happened to you when she wrote that. Like she wrote
Yeah,
this
that
piece,
is,
but she
yeah,
pulled that out of it. It was very interesting.
that is really interesting, and kind of exactly how I imagine it to be. I imagine that if you didn't know who I was, you might think that I, have some way of knowing about this. Just because I feel like I can write about it in such a personal way.
Hmm.
I feel like I can pour this experience into Patch. So when I'm writing it, I can credibly say this is how I felt, so this is how Patch feels, and it lends itself to this kind of story really well, and particularly because I didn't want it to be like a gloomy, depressing story. This bad thing happens, but then there's a long part of the book afterwards, where sometimes nothing much happens, which are my favorite parts of the book. My favorite parts to write is when it's just Patch and Saint kind of moving forward with their lives and living normal lives and forming relationships and building families and doing the things that they should be doing. And then every time that something happens to do with this case in their lives, it's kind of dragging them back.
Hmm.
And Saint particularly knows that for Patch, the only way to really cut that tie is to help him, because one way or another, he needs closure. He needs to
Right.
find if this girl even exists, first of all, and if she's okay. And they definitely need to find the man that took them, and get some, not justice necessarily, just some answers. And that's the only way he's going to move on. And so Saint, it's as much Saint's sliding doors moment as it is Patch's, because Saint's life, she is a girl that would be heading to the Ivy League.
Yes.
She's very intelligent, very kind, very capable. She would, without a doubt, live a different life to the path that she chooses in the book. And so both of them and everyone involved, Saint's grandmother, the police chief, Nick's, everyone's lives would be different had this thing not happened.
Yeah. And the thing happens very early. The thing happens very early in the book. So you're just like, the setup's there. Where do we go from there? I mean, to talk about what happened with you when you were young. When did you tell your mother about that night? You told your father 3 years ago. Did your mother
Um,
read the book and
yeah,
find out, or like watch
no,
it?
no, we had a discussion about it, and it was a difficult
Yeah.
talk about it. Yeah, and yeah, that relationship has been more difficult because I think she feels like, there's questions about why I didn't say anything at the time,
Mhm.
because she wanted to help me, and she's a brilliant mother, she would have helped me, and I think she understands why I didn't. So that helps.
Yeah. It's just, you sit there and you say, well, what happened along the way to your kids? Because there's this line that I always heard that people put fingerprints on your children
Hmm.
along the way. And if there's their baseball coach, their teacher, or whatever, and you want to be very careful about who puts the fingerprints on your children. And after what you've been through, you're very cautious about what happens, who's there, what do they say to them, how do they treat them, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How do you feel? So once again, as we did with Begin at the End, you have young people, Saint and Patch. What do you love about writing young people? Is it the innocence? Is it their discovery? What is it?
Everything. I think it's because that's the time when those are your formative years, you know. It's and it was really interesting writing them from child to adult, because if you jump straight into an adult story, you might be very frustrated by Patch and the things that he does. And but because we've joined him at such a young age and we've been through this terrible thing that's really shaped him as a person, we understand everything that he does. Every single moment in the book when he does something reckless, or we're frustrated, or when he's very kind, where he's very loving, we know what it's taken to get him to that point. So that's what's really interesting about it. And I think because my own life was so heavily shaped by that period of time, I constantly revisit it with characters and find new ways for them to get through it and overcome things, and find their way, really. Because I think part of that journey is understanding, particularly with characters like Patch and Saint with Duchess. We to witness a child going through something difficult, it's a really emotive thing, and you would hope that even if you don't necessarily like them or you're frustrated by them, you would hope that a reader would empathize enough and really care and really want them to come out the other side of it. And I think that's what drives my stories.
And they're not perfect. They're not the most popular. They're not the this. They're
No,
the
they're
people
not.
that we might skirt past during the day. We might just walk past and not kind of notice. But their stories you're showing are still so important that we often look, especially these days, to celebrity and glamour and things like that. And we don't think about the everyday person whose
Yeah,
Instagram story might not be that interesting, but they are. Their
yeah,
passion for things may be very different, but it's still there. And I think
yeah.
that we're so top line these days that your
We
books
are.
delve into who people are.
Yeah, well, it's certainly the case with someone like Patch, because he would go out of his way to hide that side of himself,
Mhm.
and to present like I did. I went out of my way throughout my life to hide all the problems that I was having and just present this person that is okay and fine, and you don't need to worry about. And Patch definitely does that, because in the beginning of the book, it's only because Saint goes up to the window of his house one day and looks through it that she finds out that his mother is an alcoholic and and not capable of looking after him, because he would never admit that,
Mhm.
because possibly he wouldn't like to be seen as a victim. He wouldn't like to be seen or pitied in any way, and he wouldn't like anyone to think badly of his mother.
Yeah.
So it's about the versions of ourselves that we present versus what's really going on.
Yeah. And I don't want anyone to know this because then, yes, they will think badly of me because this is something
Yeah.
bad. So that person's attributes come on to me. So as a
Hmm.
result, I have to push them away. Also, Patch has one eye, but he seems to see the world more broadly for this. And I really
Yeah.
love the fact he sees like across, whereas you and I will always see one side of what's going on. You
Yeah.
painted him as a very different kind of character.
Yeah, he is. He's kind of brilliant in loads of ways. but none of them are over like obvious at the beginning of the book. You know, he
Hmm.
just seems like a kid that wants to disappear, that wants to keep his head down. He's got a really good imagination, you know, with the pirate thing, and he is funny as well. You know, he makes Saint laugh all the time. But there's a line in the book where it talks about how he tries to exist in their shadow of Norma and Saint because he sees them as this kind of perfect family, you know, and they're not clearly because Saint's got her own problems, you know, and she doesn't have parents and her grandmother's raising her, and that doesn't always go well. But Saint Patch is just so happy to be in their lives and be allowed to be in, you know, this kind of bubble that he's seen that he tries to play it very carefully, tries to be quiet sometimes, is very kind, you know. And that in itself is kind of heartbreaking for a kid to worry about that kind of thing and for that to be on their mind, you know, that's even relevant, you know, in their lives. It'd be like my kids, you know, worrying about things like that. I can't even bear to think of it. And I know that they don't, and I know that they don't have to. And yeah, he was just such a good character to write, and Saint particularly as well, you know. Saint was just a joy to write. She's so everything that you want in a friend, in a
Hmm.
daughter, in just someone in your life, you know, everyone would want a Saint in their life.
Yeah, and her name is perfect. Perfect. And
Yeah.
did one come before the other? Did Patch come first? Saint
Patch
come
came
first?
first.
Patch come
Yeah,
first.
Patch came first. So I knew that I knew that I had this outline for a story, you know, of kind of boy meets girl in the dark, and then something happens from there. And I knew the boy was Patch, and I didn't know about the girl. You know, I didn't know if she would exist, if she was like made up. I just knew that that was going to be the core part of the story. And Saint, I wrote the first 6 months of writing this was just Patch and Saint in conversation, and then the next 6 months I brought in some other characters. So there was a lot of dialogue written first, a lot of them getting to know each other and withholding information, offering things up, and so there was a lot of back and forth, and I just learned a lot about them by having them go on these walks. They walk through the forest together and things like that, and find out loads about each other. And then the beekeeper came into it, and so you had the scene that one of the early scenes was Patch turning up and looking for honey, you know, because he wanted
Hmm.
to eat honey because he's
Yeah.
greedy and he's hungry and saying bit kind of desperate for a friend. And so I knew then that I had my leads, and I knew that I could hang this entire huge story on their shoulders and they would be okay because they were such strong characters. I knew that they would kind of pull the reader along through this story with them.
I love the fact that you do the dialogue first because you're doing what they're going to be saying and you can write around. And I was looking through the book, there are whole pages that are still dialogue. There's still
Yeah.
dialogue going through.
Yeah.
It didn't change because
No.
what they're doing is emotive enough of what's going on that they
Yeah.
don't need background behind them. Am I?
No, that's exactly right. And yeah, and I did think about how we get to know the people in our lives, you know, like partners and friends, and it's through conversation.
Mhm.
That's how the friendships are struck. It's very rare that there will be an action, and it's very you don't get to watch people doing things, you know. So I wanted to throw a reader right in there, you know, and the only way to do that would be for me to have done the background, you know, and have spent a year writing it before the story even begins.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that you know, it feels right and it doesn't feel like I'm just making someone up. They feel like fully formed real characters because that's how they feel to me.
Yeah, and they felt like they felt, but the incidents that they get themselves into, the situations, also felt very real because they were moving along in age, they were moving along in
Yeah.
whatever, but you were still getting to feel like this is exactly what they're saying, not what I'm putting in their mouth. It
Mhm.
didn't feel like you're putting words, it felt like they were just saying them. You were writing
Yeah.
them down, you know?
Yeah, it felt like that when I was writing it.
Yeah.
It was this, yeah, it by the end of it, I knew what every character would do and say in any given situation. You know,
Yeah.
I could pick Saint up and put her down anywhere, and I would know how she would think and how she would feel, and what she would offer up and what she would hold back, and which side of herself she would present. And I did that for every character in the book.
Oh, wow. You know, and then we've got the character of Misty. She's got everything in life that, or so people think. People think
Yeah.
she's got that. And Patch risks his life for her, and that happens early. Did you ever play around with having anything happen later? Like, did you ever feel like you needed a bigger buildup, or was there a bigger buildup, or did everything really happen that soon in the book?
No, everything happened that soon. I knew that probably it would be the least interesting part of the book. Certainly for me, it is, you know, it's a bad thing that happens. Let's do it. Let's get into it and then get into the really interesting parts of what comes next. And Misty was a really fun character to write because she's kind of in the way in a lot of the story.
Hmm.
And so many readers have said that to me that they didn't want to like her. That you kind of just want to pick her up and move her out the way and let Patch and Saint, just coexist together. And Misty is this kind of thorn between them, and she's beautiful and intelligent and wealthy and kind of everything that Saint would feel like she isn't.
Right.
She'd defer to someone like Misty, even though Saint is really clever, and has all these lovely qualities as well. It's still very much, the school playground, the schoolyard, it's the popular kids win all the time. And that's certainly the case at the beginning of the book. But Misty is her own person and she's quite brilliant, and she's funny and sweet and everyone across the board that has messaged me about the book has mentioned how much they loved Misty and the
Yeah.
character of Misty. And you can kind of see why. You can see why Saint doesn't want to like her.
Yeah.
But I think she kind of runs out of reasons for not liking her.
But she also has to be there. You've got to be this, there've got to be this opposite so you understand. If everybody was like Patch and Saint, it would not be the same book. It would
No.
not, you have to have some aspirational things of her wishing she looked like that in a dress or her hair looked like that or whatever to understand who she is. So, and then Norma, she's like this great character. She drives the bus. Everybody thinks different things about her. And I just felt like you had a good time writing her because she's also different. She's not the same.
She isn't, she's probably not all that maternal.
Yeah.
I mean, but in a very different way to the way that Patch's mother isn't that maternal. Patch's mother isn't maternal because of the trauma of losing her husband, and you get the feeling she is a mum. She's supposed to be a mum. She's just lost the kind of handbook for how to do it, and she can't really get on top of her feelings. But Norma is I loved writing Norma. She's really tough. She's quite hard on Saint, but she loves her, unconditionally. There is almost a worship there, that her granddaughter is the best thing in the world and she deserves the world. And she sees Patch as someone that will probably stop that happening. He's kind of this dangerous character. She doesn't dislike him in any way, and she really feels for him, but her loyalties are to Saint. And so she'll put Saint's feelings and well-being and future above anyone else's, including Patch's. And for Saint, I think that makes her think that her grandmother doesn't like him. And
Yeah.
and there's a scene in the book where she says that, and Norma's kind of horrified, but doesn't apologize for the fact that Saint has to come first. And
Saint should go to the school. Saint should do this. She shouldn't hold herself back. And
exactly.
you know, it's like you talk about how we get to know people from their conversations, and we really do. If you get in a room with somebody for
Yep.
10 minutes, you can get a good vibe on them. You can tell whether they're faking it real. You can pick up all
Yeah.
these things really quickly. So when you're building the story like this, you really can get these characters all infused with whatever they've got to be, and then pull back from there to tell the rest.
Yeah.
And the
That's
mountains
exactly.
were beautiful, or the sand was hot, or whatever,
Yeah.
because it's more like the people are mattering, unless their feet are really hot on the sand. Other
Yeah.
than that, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah. It was just such a long process,
Yeah.
telling the story. It was so because I think it started in my mind as one kind of book and then it changed into something else, then it changed into something else. And I realized that it was never going to fit anywhere. It was never going to be like a crime thriller or a mystery or a love story. It was going to be those things, but everything else as well.
Yeah.
And as soon as I realized that I was kind of writing a life story, then I went with it and it was okay. And I thought life is made up of periods of wild excitement and then normality and then terrible things happening and love and coming of age and obsession and all of these things make us and make us, make our lives whole. And so to write a story about it, it was never going to be easy and it was never going to be quick. And I had the complete trust of my editors, in the UK and US and publishers, and they were just incredibly supportive and kind and just let me write the book that I wanted to write. And throughout it were very supportive and checked in constantly and asked how I was getting on and if I needed help and things like that. And there was always gentle guidance, and I don't think I could have done it without that. without that freedom, certainly in the first few years. And then we went through a really tough editorial process that went on for a year or more. And the book changed massively. And it felt like everyone pulling together to create something special, and put their absolute best into it. And I think that's a really special thing to happen, just that everyone is invested fully and everyone gives everything. They think we're going to make this the absolute best book that we can. We're going to publish it in the best way. Everyone brought their A game,
Hmm.
and I think that's why it works so well. I
Yeah.
think there was no weak part of it. It was tough to work out which genre to put it in, but no one kind of gave up or just threw it into any old place. They thought very hard about how to market it, who
Hmm.
was going to read it, and how to reach those readers.
Hmm.
And just being part of that has been, yeah, the best publication experience of my life, easily by a mile.
Yeah, I mean the number of quotes on the back of this galley are like amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. And then, Kristen Han on the front of the book. I mean, it's an amazing battery of quotes. But
Well,
I
Kristen
always
Han is the nicest. She's just so kind. Like
yes.
I can't imagine how busy she is. She's insanely successful, and I'm a relative nobody, and she, will go to bat for me and really help me and be really kind, and that tells you a lot about a person, I think. And
Yes, you have to meet at some point.
yeah,
You'd enjoy that.
yeah,
You'd completely enjoy that. I remember this book took so long to write. I talked to you, I guess it was November 2022, something like that. And you said to me, by the way, please tell Amy she's not getting the book by Christmas.
yeah,
And I was like, oh, okay. Just have me call Amy and tell her that she's not going to have this by Christmas.
yeah. I like to farm out those jobs. They're really
Yeah.
difficult.
Delegate to Carol. Carol, make the call. It's
Yeah,
not going to be a
because
problem.
then it's better that the messenger gets shot than me.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Because you're the writer. I mean, I couldn't pick up the dialogue from there. I wouldn't know what to do. But beyond writing dialogue, you're this wicked researcher. You research for a long time to get a feel for a place where the book is set in each place along the way and get the feeling you need. And you haven't been to many of the towns you write about. I feel like I should send you on a tour of just
I
all the
should.
places you are, all the places you've
Yeah.
been. And that would have been a great paperback tour for the book is go to
Yeah.
the towns that you write about and what's it like. And you do a lot of research so you feel like you're actually there. Tell us what that's like because you've done this dialogue and now you got to couch it.
Yeah. Well, at the time of writing it, I hadn't been to anywhere in the book. Not a single place that
Yeah.
Patch goes to, I've been to. So that in itself might seem daunting. But I didn't dwell on it too much. I just thought I want to know what this place is like, so I'll find out. And I'll find out through the library, through reading, through non-fiction, through listening to audio, through transcripts, and just, non-fiction and watching TV documentaries, and just like I completely immerse myself in the time, in the culture, in everything that's going on in the book, in the kind of wildlife that would live in this town, how the town would be, is that like kind of made up, the geography of it, where the wealthier houses would be, the bigger houses with the wealthier people that live in them. And it was just like a full immersion. And that in itself can be quite difficult because you tend to lose the way a lot. Like I would overwrite scenes massively and then begin to cut them back. So I write hundreds of thousands of words, cut them back again and again and again until what you're left with is this feeling that everything in it is real. If
Mhm.
Saint's taking a walk, you're walking right alongside her. If Misty is going to a dance, you have a front row seat to everything that's happening, and you can kind of tap into how they're feeling, what they can hear, what they can smell, what they can see. Every single part of it is heavily researched and overwritten and then cut. And that's just there's no shortcut for that. That's the process that I follow for every scene in the book. And then when that's done, we cut again and again because the book is too long, and then eventually end up with something closer to the book that's sitting behind you on the shelf. And the first time I saw that was in Aspen. I went there because they sent me the book, and I'd left to go on tour before the book arrived. So I walked into this bookstore called Explorer Books, a beautiful bookstore in Aspen,
Yeah.
and bumped straight into the book. And it was really like, one of those pinch me moments. It's always exciting unboxing the finished thing, but to go into a bookstore and see it on the shelf before you've held it, or it was really cool.
I
Yeah.
was in that store a couple of weeks ago,
Mm.
believe it or not. I was in Aspen and I was
Okay.
thinking of you being there when I was walking down the
Yeah.
street. We went in the bookstore and I was like, It's amazing to walk in the store and say, "Hey, that's my book. That I'm the person who wrote that."
That never gets old, ever.
Never.
Ever. No,
No.
whenever every bookshop I go into, if I walk past the window and it's in the window, if I go into a library, see it on the shelf, if someone even posts about it, if they send me a picture of them holding the book or something, that is just a constant like rush. It's just
Yeah.
really exciting and I can't quite believe it, that I get to tell stories for a living.
Right.
Um,
And they
yeah.
end up someplace. It's not just them
Yeah.
telling stories. They end up in these tiny towns, these big towns. And I really love where the book wraps. And I'm not going to talk about where it is, but it's a place that's special to me.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely amazing when I read that because I got the clues. I picked up on the clues like that when I was seeing it. I was like, oh, I know where they're going. And that was the last two lines are just beautiful. I mean, really, really, really
Oh God, they
beautiful.
were so hard to write. They were
Oh,
like a month of just staring at the screen, of writing a line, deleting it, writing it, deleting it. Nothing fit. Nothing could kind of bring the show to a close.
yeah,
And it was so late that it came. And you do kind of worry and you think, what if I can't end this? What if I can't land
yeah,
this story? And then somehow it happens, and then you get this feeling like I'm done. I
yeah.
can't do any more work to this. This is the best possible book that I can write, and this is the first book that's happened on. It didn't happen on We Begin at the End. That was still I want to edit it. I want to change it. This one, I thought I can't do any more to it, and
No, those last
yeah.
two lines were just like, got it. So are you happy when you write or you're torturing yourself?
I think both. I
Yeah,
think that I'm happy having written. That's what people say.
yeah.
And the writing part is torture, but I think the payoff is worth it because the happiness that I get from it at the end, like I feel like I've accomplished something, I've achieved something, I'm
Hmm.
proud of it, and I'm not proud of much that I've done in my life, but the books, um, the books are my kids. That's about it, really.
Yeah, it's
So
like we begin at the end. The feeling you get at the end. You've got to think about the feeling that I get at the end
yeah.
is like when I begin, I've got to think about the feeling I'm going to have at the end when it's
Exactly.
finished.
Otherwise, you wouldn't do it.
No.
And I do like a lot of the time. I finish writing a book like with this one, and I think I don't want to do it again, or I can't do it again. And it's a genuine feeling. Like I feel
Hmm.
like it's too difficult, and it's not worth it, for it to be this hard and to affect my mood so much and things like that. And then within a week or so, I'm beginning something else because it's all I know how to do now, really.
It's what if? What if this happened? What if that
Yeah.
happened? Huh? Let
Yeah.
me think about this, you know? You did two extensive tours of the United States with this book, which you didn't do the last time. Do you have a list of places you want to see here, like that you'd like to go back to and really spend time in?
I'm coming again in October and again in November and again in January now. Yeah.
You are coming in October. Do you know, are you doing something specific or is it
I'm
just,
doing another tour.
oh, you
Yeah.
are?
October, yeah.
Oh,
But I'll
I
still
might have
let you
something
know
for
where I'm
that.
going.
Oh, I got to get
I
in touch with
don't
Dan.
yeah, I don't have all the details yet, but yeah, so that will be exciting. And
Oh,
yeah, there's still like Montana. I haven't been to Montana, and
you got to go to Montana.
because it's Duchess, it's really
Yes.
close to my heart, and that book changed my life. So that is one of my absolutely have to go to places.
Do you know what you're actually showing too is it's not just the big cities, it's the off the beaten places. It's the
Yeah,
places where Lisa C talks about this a lot, that nobody really goes. The authors don't go. She did an event recently in Oregon, and there were hundreds of people at this
yeah,
event because they don't have an author every week like we have in New
yeah.
York or New Jersey. You know, it's not the same. Not the same.
Well, I went to Petoskey and McLean and Aitken there, and they have a bookseller called Maris, who is my friend now, and she like that was the biggest event I'd done.
Mhm.
The turnout for that, they sold hundreds of tickets, and that bookstore has sold more copies of All the Colors of the Dark than anywhere else in the whole country.
Wow.
Because she drives it. They're now number one in the country, and that is really cool, isn't it?
And where's
Just
she? Where's she? Where's her store?
in Petoskey,
Wow.
and it's a beautiful bookstore,
Yeah.
and everyone that works there was amazing, and yeah, it was somewhere that I would never think to visit,
Hmm.
you know, because I
Hmm.
didn't even know it existed. Like most places in the US, I don't know them until I stumble across them when I'm researching and things like that,
Yeah.
and and now it has a special place in my heart. So
Yeah. It's going
very
back to
cool.
those places. I really love that Saint and Patch also have their own talents. You're a talented writer. They also have talented in the arts. She is a pianist. Do you play at all?
I don't.
Chopsticks?
I would love to. I really would love to. I'd love to have learnt an instrument, particularly the piano. So no, I don't do that. I don't paint. I don't have an interest in pirates. I don't share all. I share almost no hobbies or interests with any of my characters. But
Right.
they are very passionate about them, and I enjoy researching them and looking at them through their eyes. Saint is. I love the scenes where Saint's playing the piano, particularly where she's playing the piano to Patch
Hmm.
um, because it's a really vulnerable side to her. It's her letting Patch see what she's passionate about and what probably other kids might make fun of her about. She trusts him enough to sit down and she's so not showy in any way. She'd be mortified if Patch thought she was showing off. But
Hmm.
she knows that he won't think that, and he'll just think, that it's beautiful and she can do this thing. And that's what's so lovely about their friendship, that they see the best in each other
Right.
and I really loved writing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way he's an artist, but it's not about the money. It's about what he's giving to the people that he's
Yeah,
making the drawings for, making the
yes,
paintings for.
yeah,
And when she's playing for him. It's not playing, and she's playing classical music. She's not playing,
yeah,
whatever. She's playing what she feels and what she feels he would be enjoying. It's
yeah.
very, very different. The way art is sometimes done as commercial, for neither one of them is art commercial.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's very just about its passion, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's Patch finding a way to help people, and Saint finding a way to help Patch.
Yeah. Were you keeping a list somewhere about what happens every year to be sure the pop culture references were right? Like this song
Oh,
is here, or I mean, a
yeah.
lot of people are talking about the songs. This book needs a soundtrack on your website.
Yes. Yeah, there's a playlist on Spotify actually.
Okay.
I think I posted it a while ago that they did, the Read with Jenna team did as well. And but that doesn't scratch the surface because I think there's only like 6 songs on it or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was keeping meticulous notes and still made mistakes. Inevitably. A book that big, spanning that long, it was so many mistakes and the copy editors earned their money. They really did. They
Yeah.
found so many things that I had missed and sometimes you put something down as a placeholder. Like I'll put that they see a certain site and I'll put it down with like an asterisk next to it because I know I need to come back and do proper research into that, but I'm caught up in a scene and then I'll forget to go back at some point and because I've gone down another rabbit hole with another part of the story.
Right.
So yeah, it was just constantly like feeling my way
Figuring
and
what to
taking
do.
wrong turns and going down dead ends and coming doubling back and like yeah, it was. And see, this is why I don't want to do it again. Just talking about it now reminds me of the hell that it
All right, well,
was.
let me talk about the good parts then. I want to talk about the good parts. Okay, now I want to know why there are 261 1 to 3 page chapters. Okay. What drew you to write that way, especially since each chapter is not completely the scene of what happens?
No. So there's two reasons for it. The simplest reason is that it keeps the pace going. It's a very big book, and if you can say to yourself just one more chapter, it keeps the momentum up when that one chapter is never more than about 3 pages and often is a single page or 2 pages. So there's a lot of natural breaks. And secondly, more complex, and the real reason why there's so many is because some of the scenes were really difficult to write. Like if I was writing Patch in the basement, it was so difficult to write because I think I was drawing on a lot of the stuff that I'd been through as a kid that I would break constantly. And I would break there, I would write them going to prom. I would go back to the basement. I'd skip ahead and write Patch and Misty, something there, like them in the lake. Cut again, right? Saint playing the piano. And so there were lots of breaks because it became so difficult to write and because it became so heavy for me and affected my mood. And like I didn't want to spend all that time in the basement. And so I just broke constantly. And so when
Uh-huh.
I read it back to myself, it stopped me getting too into it as well, finding it too difficult. So because I could just break all the time. So it was kind of for me. And then it works really well with the story. I think if you go into it and it's nearly 600 pages, that can be daunting, but it's a fast read.
Then you sit
It,
there, oh, one
yeah.
chapter, 3 chapters. Now, I just want to tell you though, I've cautioned our readers not to look at the end of the chapter at the end of what's going on. And I said, it's not the same reading. The next chapter, you may have more. In fact, I've actually recommended people settle in and read bigger chunks of this book than you were
Okay.
able to, because
Yeah.
I feel it'll wrap them up. I mean, I remember Jenna saying she read the whole thing in one sitting. And reading the book in one sitting is very different than reading books in bits and bytes. And there's some books you can read in bits and bytes, but
Yep.
this one I feel like I really wrote that in my bets on. I said, I really recommend when you read it, though, you sit down and read a big chunk. So
Yeah.
whether it's the 1 to 3 chapters or 3 page chapters, I was saying, okay, you commit and read a chunk. Like just go down and do this because it's going to put you in a place because you may wake up the next morning, they're doing the same thing, and you may have to go back and read the chapter before.
Yeah.
That's just my
Yeah.
take.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. I think that it's a story where you could break at the end of each part. You could go through the part where they're children, or you could go through the bit, the abduction, the hunt. There's lots of places you can
Yes.
break, and there's bits where we skip ahead by 5 or 10 years, and they're natural breaks as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That was just my recommendation, though I know you like the 1 to 3 page chapters and I get it. But I'm saying to people, don't think you're at the end. You're going to have that same feeling next page. And if you're
Yeah.
reading it before you go to bed, you're going to have to go back and pick yourself up like where you are.
Yep.
This is
Yep.
so your editor and agent see the book around year 4, 3.5, something like that. And then you really go to work all together.
We do. Yep. Yep.
Many
That's what.
notes.
Loads of notes. Yeah, a book this big as well. A thorough edit from the UK and the US, back and forth between both of them. Then they come together. Then we work from the same kind of song sheet, and that helps. And yeah, it was none of it was unpleasant, the editorial process.
Mhm,
It was just a big book, and it was about refocusing at times. And there were times where I'd gone too far in a certain direction, and needed to, you get too close to it when you've
mhm.
written it, and you need someone with fresh eyes to look at it and tell you, a different view, basically.
Sometimes they say you don't need this. You already said it. You don't need this.
Yeah,
You said it
exactly.
better here, or pick this one up and drop that one. Do
Yep.
something like that. And I feel like that sometimes it's missed. Was this always the title?
It had no title for 4 years, so there was no title. But
It was
once
always the title once you had
Yeah.
it.
So once we started brainstorming, it was the only one that everyone agreed on,
Yeah.
and it speaks of that darkness and finding light in the dark, and in particular Patch, going into there, one person coming out somewhere, someone else, and finding his way to art and finding his way to light and visiting, seeing all these amazing sights because he's hunting for this girl, and he's probably a kid that would never leave the town that he grew up in, but all of a sudden his world is wide open because of this terrible darkness, this terrible thing that happens to him. So it was about finding the color in it, finding the light in the bad.
Hmm. Yeah, the colors you see in the dark. Like you think you're seeing nothing, but what's the emotion? What's there? What's there?
Yes.
Are the colors that came to light. This is always the cover?
In the US, yes. Yeah, and the UK is very different.
Very
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
Amy moved because she was at Hull and she moved to Crown. And as soon as she got to Crown, she briefed them on the story, and that was the first cover they came up with. And I think it's really cool. I
It's
like
really
this.
cool.
Yeah, it's just the slash of paint down it. It really makes me imagine Patch, with his brush in hand. And
Brushing hand painting. Yeah.
yeah, and that's what I mean about everyone just giving it and just doing the most amazing job. Like even the copy on the back of it, it's a really difficult book to sum up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
Got all
just,
these
yeah.
quotes, and then you've got this beautiful, like right in here, writing.
Yep.
I'm not gonna pick
Yep.
up any of this, but there, it's there. Edoardo Ballerini did narrates the audio. So what was that like?
Correct.
I take you have heard his narration, and it's so good.
Yeah, like that is the one that people message me about the most, the audiobook. The audiobook sales have been amazing, like really, really
Yes.
high. And I credit that to him and the audio team at PRH because they've done the best job, and they sent me a load of actors reading parts of the book, but Eduardo was like, when you just hear it, and because I'd only ever heard it in my own head up
Yes.
until that time, to hear all of a sudden the way that it should be read, it was a special feeling. And then we had a Zoom together, and he is the most lovely guy and incredibly talented and
Mhm.
passionate about the story. And yeah, that's a very difficult job, narrating an audiobook because it's
Yeah.
acting and it's all voice acting. And yeah, he just absolutely nailed it. Yeah.
And you have so much dialogue. There's so much
So much.
dialogue.
So
So
much.
to nail the dialogue right was
Exactly.
that's the big thing, you know?
Yeah. Hmm.
I remember hearing you found out that this oh wait, one quick thing on audio. Audio sales are like so up right now. They're so through the roof about what's going on. And what I think also on a book like this book can be read by people who are gravitating out of YA, like out
Yeah.
of like what
Yeah.
to go read next, because it's
Hmm.
such a powerful story. It's a story about love. It's a story about love on top of everything else. And a lot of the younger readers are also listening to audio because they've immediately made the move. They're on Spotify. Why not listening to audiobooks at the same time? So
Yeah.
I think an
Yeah.
interesting moment. So you found out that this was a read with Jenna selection very early, and then you were not allowed to tell anybody. You had to just keep
No,
your
sworn
quiet.
to secrecy. Yep.
What was
Yeah.
that like a year
It
ago?
was, well, it's one of those, because the book wasn't fully finished. And so I thought if someone like Jenna, who, is the most passionate and just the way that she reads. She knew everything about the story when I met her, and she hadn't had that long to read it, and she just knew it inside out. Like she had kind of just done nothing but read it and inhaled it, and become part of the process, and she was just incredible. So to have that, it was more that vote of confidence, really, because
Mhm.
aside from her and the few people that I met with early on, not many people have read it.
Mm-mm.
Not many at all. Like you could probably count them on two hands, and they were all connected to the book. So Jenna and her team were like the first outside force to read the book. And so they're the first people I'm meeting with that haven't worked on the book, and I'm getting their opinions. So that was really exciting and kind of nerve-wracking, and it was a good barometer for whether we had got it right or not.
Yeah,
And she was so effusive about it and passionate about it, and I came away from that meeting just thinking, yeah, we've
we've
you
got
know
it.
yeah, we've got yeah, kind of, yeah. I thought like we Jenna's seen what we tried to do and understood the story in the way that I wanted a reader to. So it means that we've done our job, and then to have someone like her as a partner, when you go into publication, is
Right.
a dream. It really is. Her
Mhm.
reach and just the way that she talked about the book. When she announced and the stuff she said, and then straight away it shot to number one. And that's because people trust her, and
Yeah.
they're right to trust her because she knows her stuff and she reads everything. And she speaks so highly of all the books that she picks, and so much research and so much work and effort goes into that because she gets sent everything. If you can
Yeah.
imagine
Oh yeah.
every publisher sending every book trying to get it picked, and she reads everything. So when she does pick something, it's because she truly loves it.
Right. And then she's working with you on the film adaptation, which
She
you
is.
I remember you saying in Brielle was a much longer book when they saw it. So they've got lots of scenes, they've got
Yeah.
lots of material that's not in the
Yeah.
book, but they at least have a feeling about it.
Yeah, they have, and I've read the pilot, and it's incredible. So yeah,
It's
it's
great.
really like it's beyond exciting. It really is. To have like the team involved, like Sue and Sarah. Sarah's doing the writing. They're just so talented.
Right.
They can take a book like that and see things that I can't possibly see, and then write it, as it should be seen on the screen, and
Right.
so they come up with new scenes and things. Yeah, so it feels really faithful to the story, but it feels really original as well. And for me, it's just yeah, just really exciting.
But that's because they had your material to start with. They
Yeah,
had
for
great
sure.
bones to work with.
Yeah,
They've got great bones and fleshing out to work with. That you flesh it out further, it's only because there was something great there at the beginning. If there wasn't, you can't do that. You can't make it up from scratch. And you can tell
yeah,
sometimes the shows that are adapted and they're from scratch and they're not great. It just doesn't
yeah.
work like that.
But also on the kind of flip side, not everything is meant to be
Hmm.
made to TV. Not
Yes.
every book works for that. And so when the book went to my friend Jordan, who works at Universal, who's Geordie. Geordie loves books,
Right.
Geordie's book club on Instagram. I asked him, he was one of the first people I said, and I said, do you think it'd work for screen? And because I'm very aware that, not everything should be.
Right.
Some books are just supposed to be books. and thank God he said yes. I really wanted to see it on screen, like every author does. I think they want it
Yeah,
to.
it's like, oh, it's cinematic enough. And I hear it's supposed to be a television series spanning a couple of years, like not just one
Yes,
season.
not just one season. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
the plan so far. That's what
Yeah,
I've heard so far. Yeah, but I've
which is
only.
smart, which is
I
smart
think
because
so.
it's too
There's a
much
lot
for
of
one.
story in that book.
Yeah.
So, but then on the flip side, screen time, eats story, doesn't it? You need a lot of story to fill a season or two of television, but it couldn't be in safer hands.
But you also can do a lot of quiet, of walking and scenery that you don't write the same way in a book. It's just,
No,
you can write
exactly.
just so much of that in the book. And the character can say a lot less because there's a look or there's an inference or a hand motion that you can't have in the book. You
Yeah,
just,
that's
even
right.
thinking of the eye patch, but seeing the eye patch are two different things. So,
Hmm.
so are you involved beyond reading, or is that really what
Yes.
you're doing for it?
Yeah. No, I've given notes and I have an exec producer role and I plan on being as involved as they want me to be
Excellent.
because I just love it. It's my story and now it's our story and I want to be part of it. Yeah. And just because I really enjoy it as
Yeah.
well. I really love it. So yeah.
You writing something next? Writing dialogue for something next?
I am, yeah. It's called The Timekeeper, and it is a mix. It's kind of the time traveler's wife meets the Fault in Our Stars, and it's a love story. It's an outright love story. Yeah.
There we go. So let's
There
say
we
4 years from now, 4 years.
Hopefully less. Hopefully less
I hope
this
so.
time.
I think everybody hopes less. I think everybody hopes less this time. Anybody who hasn't read, we begin at the end. You at least have something to go back to if you're just discovering Chris now. But for the rest of us, we're waiting. Okay.
I'm doing it. I couldn't work any harder on it. So yeah.
Let's say that. Thank you
Hmm.
so much for joining us. It's so good to hear
Thanks.
from you again. It's been a long
Yeah.
4 years of not talking to you, or two, actually two before I was supposed to deliver the word to Amy. You weren't done. Okay. I'll
Okay.
take it on. If you need me
Yeah.
to call
I'll
anybody,
let you
I'll be
know.
happy to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Carol. It's always just, yeah, a joy to talk to you. So
Such a pleasure. Next
thanks a
time.
lot.
Next time. And to everybody else, we'll see you next time as well. Thanks so much for joining us.